So we ended on this slide talking about some of the harm that's been done by the field of psychology. I think you mentioned some psychological treatments that have caused harm. Definitely for people who have been marginalized or minoritized throughout history, the harm has impacted them the most, right? That includes people of color, that includes people with disabilities, people who don't ascribe to maybe binary gender. Lots of individuals have been harmed by psychology. Is anyone familiar with that word, that first word there, eugenics, what that is? Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah, so it's related to selective breeding, basically the idea that there is one race that is superior to others, and it would be important to continue that race and basically genocide for others. So this has, unfortunately, some of the early psychologists were also involved in the eugenics movement, both in the United States as well as around the world. There's been terrible racist articles published in academic journals about certain races having inferior intelligence that have now been retracted and recognized, like this was just bad science, no science really, and extremely racist. So we do have that history, that it's important to recognize that as part of psychology and see what we can do better going forward. Okay. I'm going to present to you, this is from the American Psychological Association, which is our field in psychology. They have put forth these integrated themes. So this is what's currently important to psychologists today. I'm just going to read them out so you get a feel for where the field is going in the future. Okay, so number one, we're relying on empirical evidence. We talked about that last time, right? We are a science. And we adapt as new data develops. So we're not stuck believing what we did 100 years ago. We're changing as the world changes, as we get new technology, new information. Okay. Number two, psychology explains general principles that govern behavior while recognizing individual differences. So it's great that we have theories that try to generalize across a lot of people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, but even within that, there are always individual variations, right? So it's important to have both of those at the same time. Not everything is true of everyone. Okay. Number three, we have to take into account not only psychological, but also biological, social, and cultural factors that influences people's behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. So all of that is important. The field of psychology should recognize important context and culture, right? Okay, we're not just living in an isolated bubble. We are impacted by the people, by the environment that we interact with every day. Okay. Number four, psychology as a field, we value diversity, we promote equity, and we foster inclusion. All of that because we recognize it's important and it matters, but also working toward a more just society. So that's part of what's important to us as a field. I'm a developmental psychologist, so a lot of what my particular society does is look at things that are happening in the world, like separation of families from, people being deported, or other things that are happening in the world that truly harms families and children and individuals, and what we can do about it, right? Okay. Number five here, our perceptions and biases filter our experience of the world, and we are all working from an imperfect personal lens. This is just saying humans have biases, right? So as psychologists, we also have biases. We try our best to be aware of them, but we recognize we all have a particular worldview. We were raised a certain way, right? We came from a certain culture and background. It's important to remember that. All right, I think we're on number 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. when we apply psychological principles, we can change our lives, organizations, and communities in positive ways. Today we're going to talk about the difference between basic and applied research. So this is getting at, we are an applied field, we do applied research. Our research makes a difference in the world, in people's lives. Okay. And then this part is important, change, like there's plasticity, there's flexibility, not rigid. And last, we do have a set of ethical principles that guide not only our research, our teaching, but also our practice. So practice refers to, like if you see a therapist or you see a psychiatrist, right? They have ethical standards. We have a whole unit we're going to talk about ethics. But this is basically our values. This is our field, like in a nutshell right now. Okay. In this class, we have many different units, but essentially all of the units fall into these 5 pillars. So these are 5 general areas of psychology, and then we have like a more specific individual topics under each one. Okay, so you're gonna see as we go through the class, we have a biological pillar, a cognitive, developmental is where I am, basically how people change and stay the same over the lifespan. Social and personality, how do you function within a society and a group, right? And then mental health and also physical health. So this is where your clinical psychology is, right? Therapy, that kind of stuff. Yes?
Do you know when that EPA very much acknowledged and established these integrated,
Yeah.
I guess, morals?
Yeah, this is fairly new because what they actually developed it for, this is like included, you'll notice there's like similar colors. So this was actually developed for intro to psych students to kind of make everything very cohesive. But in the past, within the last 5 years, the APA did come out with a statement that said, we acknowledge we've caused harm to a lot of people, and I can post that actually on Canvas because it was kind of, yeah, I mean, how many years have passed before that actually happened? It's fairly recent. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. So as we go through this class, you'll kind of put the units in these different pillars. It's a nice way to organize all this information that you're going to be getting. Okay. And what I hope you'll be doing is thinking about affect, behavior, cognitions, the ABCs of psychology, and seeing how the different areas kind of like what do psychologists think are behind those ABCs? According to what they think is the most important, that's kind of how we see our different pillars. So if they think maybe the brain is the most important thing, right? Understanding that falls under like biology, more specifically neuroscience, right? Or neuropsychology. Okay. If you think culture is the most important thing driving the ABCs, you're going to look at cross-cultural psychology or maybe developmental psychology too. All right. So just organizational tools for you all. This is on the quiz, which is why I had to postpone it. There is a difference between basic research and applied research. So in the beginning of psychology, people did research just to gain knowledge, like research for research's sake. That's called basic research. We want to understand how things work. Like, how do we sense and process stuff? How do we perceive things in our environment? And we could put them into these different pillars, right? As time went on, people started saying, how do we use this information that we gained through basic research to better people's lives, right? To make an impact in the world. That's what applied research is, right? You're taking that knowledge and you're applying it to some specific field. So here's where you get a lot of current careers in psychology, right? These are just some that are listed up here. I do have like a little quiz that you can do on your own time. kind of test yourself of these different levels of psychology. Does anyone remember what an industrial organizational psychologist does, like an IO psychologist? Yeah, what do they do?
I think it's work-related.
Yep, anything work-related. Like, how do we optimize people's work environments so they're happy, so they're coming to work, they're satisfied? That includes the physical environment. That includes feeling valued as an employee. That includes just what can we do to optimize your performance, right? Be the best worker you can be. Yeah, very lucrative field if you're looking to go into that area of psychology. Okay, this one example. So changes are happening, right, in the workplace, in the real zones. All right, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Again, you can look at these differences, quiz yourself. But this wraps up what we were supposed to finish last time. So are there any questions? Just a brief kind of overview of the field of psychology. Okay. All righty. So that means the quiz for Unit 1 will be due today. We finished everything. And then we're going to move on to Unit 2. We'll see how far we can get, okay? All right, so Unit 2 is all about psychological research, right? How do we make conclusions? How do we conduct our studies?
Go back so I can see the section.
Can I go back to which one?
Can you go back to the first slide so I can see what unit 2 is?
Oh, yes, yes.
Thank you.
There you go. No worries. Yep, psychological research. So if you continue on in psychology, we have a whole class dedicated to research. So again, this is just giving you a little look into some of the ways we collect research. Okay. Today we're talking about research setting, like where do we do research design, like the timeline of the design, and also what kind of conclusions do we want to make? Do we want to, just say that two things are related, like a correlation? Do we want to make a causal statement? Based on that, we have to choose a different research design. And hopefully, maybe not today, but we'll get to research ethics. All right. This is just a visual of some of the ways we conduct research in our field. So we do things like interviews, surveys. We do EKGs to look at brain activity, MRIs, fMRIs that look at blood flow in the brain. We do hormones, right, like cortisol out of your saliva. We do animal research a lot of times, especially if it's not ethical to do research on humans. We are doing research on animals still in an ethical way. So this is like an intelligence test that someone is being given. So lots of different ways that we collect data and do research. These are the same differentiations I showed on the outline slide, but now you have some more details here. We are going to go into each one of these. So for setting, we're going to talk about labs, laboratories, the field, what that means, and then somewhere in between those. For design, we're going to talk about cross-sectional, longitudinal, and cohort or cross-sequential. We'll talk about what that means. That's just different timelines. And then for design, we're going to specifically look at descriptive, correlational, and experiments. There are more. These are just the ones we're focusing on in this class. Each one will have a certain section. So this is just an overview slide for you. Okay. And that image there, we do have on this campus a child development lab where we can observe behind a two-way mirror an actual preschool classroom to see like the interactions between the teacher and the children and the children. And you do that in developmental psychology if you take that. That's observational research. Okay. All right, hand went down or hand still up somewhere? Okay, you cannot. Cool. All right, let's talk more about settings. So the two main settings that we conduct research in are the laboratory and the field. So when I say laboratory, I mean it's a controlled, usually pretty sterile environment. That means that we can, as researchers, manipulate variables. We can make sure there are no outside influences, everything's standardized, there's no distractions. So we're able to be really confident that whatever variables we change are the actual like cause or cause to the effect. So it's ideal for a lot of ways. The researcher has a lot of control. But what might be a limitation of conducting research in the lab? You know, you're coming into this maybe strange environment.
Well, it's a controlled environment. It's that, and it's not really like the real world.
Yeah.
Actually, the real world is kind of hard to test because there's so many variables and so many ways they can be mixed up. And
Yes.
it's not that they can.
So it's like a pros and cons thing, right? Like, you're right. In the real world, it is extremely messy. There's so much going on at one time. It's hard to isolate. But at the same time, it's more similar to how things really are, right? Sometimes what happens in a lab experiment, you may make a conclusion, but then if you actually look at people's behavior in the real world, it's not the same. It's not the same as when they were in that lab environment. So this is not to say one is better than the other. Both are actually really important, and we'd like both to make conclusions. So here's just some of the pros and cons listed for you. One thing to note is this word validity. Validity is like the truthiness or truthfulness, kind of like the accuracy of what we want to, what we're studying, what we want to conclude. Like we want a valid conclusion or valid study. So there are different kinds of validity. We're going to get into it more, but just to note that laboratories have high internal validity. That means there's a lot of control. And field settings in the real world, like, have high external validity, because you can generalize to the real world. Okay, so they're the opposite type of validity that they're high in. Okay, what's an example of a field? Well, if you went to a park, like where people are just interacting, playing, maybe you have kids playing, and you just did some observations there. Maybe you were tallying how many times people, people were sharing, kids were sharing with each other, whatever your topic is. But that's something that, you're not asking them to alter their behavior, it's their natural behavior. And you yourself maybe be, as an observer, that is not very noticeable to everyone. So you can be confident that their behavior is accurate and how they would typically respond. Okay, so pros and cons here. Any questions about these different settings? When I say in between, it is possible to have a field experiment. That's when you create a room. It's still controlled, but it kind of looks like the real world. So an example is I'll get to you in a second, a pub lab. They, in the UK, created a place within a university that looks like a pub. Okay, but they still have control. They can change the lighting, they can change the music, they can change how many people are in there. We call them accomplices to the research or confederates in the research. So it's in between. Like it feels more like something in the real world, but it still has control. That's called a field experiment. Yeah?
I was just wondering, it also depends on if the subject that is being observed knows they're being observed and also
Right.
doesn't know.
Yes, yes. I think we'll get into that a little bit more with non-experimental research, but yeah, whether they're like covert or not, or whether they're a member of the group they're studying, has a huge impact on people's behavior and what conclusions you make. Yes, good point. Don't want to forget that one. Okay, all right. So we're going to move on from research setting to research design. Again, this is the timeline part of the design. So here's just 3 different types that you can choose depending on your needs. So cross-sectional is a research happens at one period of time. Okay, you have maybe one survey, one time, that's it. Okay. Longitudinal is you follow participants over time. What do you think that's good for? Like, why would we want to do that? Yeah, what would it tell us? Yeah. Yep. So you mentioned a couple of things, like neuroscience. You also mentioned kind of like a clinical setting too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens to people over time? Are they changing in a more positive way? Are their symptoms improving? Are they getting worse? Are they growing and meeting developmental milestones? Right. We need longitudinal research to tell us that. Okay. And then cross-sectional or cohort sequential is a mix of both of them. This is the preferred method, although it is the most costly and time-intensive. Okay, so what happens is you are getting people of different ages. Like, say you're interested in, here we have 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and 10-year-olds. So we have different age groups. And then we also follow them over time. Let's say we're interested specifically at attention span, which some people may think is changing over time based on generation status and introduction of technology. So when we do a cross-sequential study, we're able to tease out anything that is not related to age or maturation, right? So that's what we really are interested in. It's like what's happening over time, and we don't want it to be because of generational changes, right? We don't want it to be just because the 6-year-olds were born at a different time than the 10-year-olds, we see these changes. We want true changes of people over time. So that last one is the best way to do that. This slide shows some of the pros and cons for each type of time design. Cross-sectional is most research. So it's easy, it's fast, you're done, right? But it doesn't tell us about change, right, over time. Longitudinal research is great, we get more information, but it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a lifetime because we want to know what happens when people get older. So we have to wait from when they're born 70 to 80 years in the future, right, to see what happens when they're older. It's really hard to maintain a study for that amount of time, but it's been done. Seattle Longitudinal Study is one good example of that.
For the longitudinal studies, can the participants decide to participate and what would happen?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges of longitudinal research. We call it attrition, or also mortality. So either after time, some people may die, right? They just die. We're usually left with like the healthiest people in our study when we get to that point. Or people may choose not to decide, or they can't be found. Like we try to contact them, but they moved, right? So that's all attrition, and it's a huge limitation in longitudinal research, yeah. We want to try to get the same people because then that's representative for our conclusions, yeah. Okay, so we would like it, it's hard, it's difficult. And then like I said, the cross-sequential has some of the same limitations that it is time intensive, takes a lot of time and resources to do. But again, we can disentangle those age and historical or generational effects from one another. So it's not their generation, it's their actual age maybe that's causing something. Question, yeah. Can you speak up a little bit too?
Yeah, sorry. Wasn't the study that a lot of news articles published on that turned out to be met because it was a longitudinal study that fell off? It's like the example of kind of like a family member who falling off of funding about the fact that the grades wouldn't show her 25 or whatever, but that was actually just the point where the study failed and they couldn't continue past that point for people.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. So, because that's a common thing we say in developmental psychology, right? That's like 25-ish is like your brain is fully mature. So you're saying that it was a problem with the research design?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it was I read an article about it being a problem with the research and the media and how they published the story, ignore that part too much and care about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds me of intelligence because there's a lot of findings about cognitive decline and intelligence that we originally did cross-sectional research. We made some conclusions that there's like these huge declines in certain parts of intelligence once we get to middle and older adulthood. But if instead of cross-sectional we do a longitudinal, those changes are a lot less drastic, right? So the conclusions are totally different based on what kind of research design we use. Yeah, so that's another good example. I'll have to look more into that. Okay. All right. Any questions about time? Going through this pretty fast, but we're getting good time. Okay. All right. This is what we're primarily working on in our seminars this week. So looking at research design in terms of what kind of conclusion do you want to make? We are separating it out into these three, although again, there's more. But generally, research can be descriptive. So you just want to describe a phenomenon. Maybe you're looking for participants' own words, right? And they're describing their feelings or experiences. There's correlational research, which is looking at the statistical association between two or more variables, right? Are two things related to each other? Can one predict the other? That's correlational study. And then we have experimental. So this is our, what we call our gold standard in psychology because it's the only one that can determine cause and effect. So with an experiment, you have researchers controlling the environment. So most of them happen in a lab setting. They manipulate a variable. They only change one variable at a time, right? Everything else is the same. So they're pretty sure it was that variable and not something else that caused the effect. And there's also random assignment. That means that there are different conditions and people are randomly assigned to either one or the other. The treatment condition or the control condition, the comparison group. Okay. Think about clinical trials. That's probably what you're most familiar with a true experiment, right? Like you're testing the effectiveness of some drug, a new drug that came out. So some people get the drug, some people don't get the drug. Which group you get placed in is totally random, 50-50 ending up in either group. All right, so why do we do that? Why is that important in psychology and medicine and other places? Yeah.
So you have a base of like what you're going off of. So like you give like if you do a study and you do half and half, you see how the people without whatever you gave them works,
Right.
and then how the people who've got what you gave them are affected.
Yes, perfect. So number one, there's a comparison group. So they're like, okay, great. These people who took the drug got better, but what if the people who didn't take the drug also got better? Like we need that information. And it wasn't the drug. It might have been just time passing, right? So that's important. And then I saw another hand. Go ahead.
Well, isn't it to see like the placebo effect on like
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So being able to measure how big the placebo effect is, because it's always there. It's a very real phenomenon. So if people get no drug, but they think they're getting a drug or they think it'll work, it usually does. So in that case, we can have a treatment group, a control group, and a placebo group to just disentangle all of that. Yeah. One super important thing that random assignment does is it ensures that both groups are equivalent. Any differences in intelligence, differences in personality, differences in education level, right, gender, race, ethnicity. Random assignment ensures that both groups have about equal percentages on all of those individual variables. Okay, so we can be confident, well, it's not because of their intelligence that this drug worked for them, right? Because the intelligence was the same across both of the groups. That's the point of random assignment. Okay. And just to note, in the experimental, there's what I just called a true experiment, and there's also something called a quasi-experiment. So quasi means like approaching or kind of like trying to be an experiment, but there's some key parts that are missing. So what's missing is either there's no random assignment, maybe it's not ethical to put people in different groups, maybe they're naturally occurring groups, like birth order, you can't You can't tell people to change that. It's just what it is. And maybe the way you manipulate variables is not possible or is different. You can't tell people to smoke cigarettes, right, to see what will happen to them, because that's not ethical. So we have to look at naturally occurring groups of people who already smoke cigarettes, right? That's a quasi-experiment.
That was sick.
I'm sure the government in the past has done some pretty unethical things. I actually am quite sure of it in different countries, but with our code of ethics today, that should not be happening.
Keyword on should.
I know. We try. We have our standards. Okay. All right. So, because experimental design is so important to our field, not to say these other ones aren't important, but you know, a lot of what we want to do is to find out like why things happen, like explain people's behaviors. Remember, explain and understand are part of goals of psychology. So to understand those cause and effect relationships, we use experiments. And this is just a visual for you all of what experiments look like in psychology and outside of psychology as well. Okay, so we have that randomization going on right here. Perfect. Intervention group or treatment group, they get something. Control group, nothing, right? And we always would like to test them before they get that treatment or they don't get that treatment, and then we test them again after. So we have a pre-test and a post-test. That allows us to see how much they've changed over time, right? So it's not cross-sectional, it's a mini longitudinal study. Okay, that's the basic design. In the sake of time, I don't think I'm going to explain this experiment, but basically they showed people cute animal pictures to see if it would influence their productivity at work. Talk about IO psychologists. And it did. It actually had a positive effect when they used pictures of baby animals.
Hang in there.
The control group, the comparison group was like adult animals, didn't have the same effect, right? Or pictures of food didn't have the same effect. But the baby animals, yeah, it really worked. Okay. Do I have a hand up there? No, it's like this. Okay. Cool. All right, I did talk to you about random assignment. Summary up there, good, we already talked about it. There's another term that's very similar, sounds very similar, it is different. It's called random sampling. Okay. So random sampling is not necessary in an experiment. It's more important in descriptive research or when we do like polls, we try to find out like percentages of people. But what it is we are getting a representative sample of the population. Okay, so it has to be like whatever variable you think of, right, in your sample is the same as in the population. So how do we do that? We have to have first information for all the people in the population and then randomly select from that population. That's random sampling. Okay, when I say the word sample, I'm talking about the participants in your study. You can't have everyone in your study. And then the population is who you want to generalize to. Okay. So if I wanted to study college students, and my sample is Cal Poly Humboldt students, do you think that might generalize to the population of all college students in the United States? Some are shaking no. What do you think might be special about students here or different? What do you think?
It's a different environment here, and I think like it's kind of one of the reasons I chose the schools because they work closely with you compared to other schools. They're like professors or their like education environment is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the type of environment is different, maybe being like a small rural institution. We're the smallest of the Cal State universities, right? That we have a more kind of hands-on or intimate approach, like in terms of teaching and research. Okay, what else? I know you have your hand up too.
I was just gonna say the type of people who come here. It's very, I'd say liberal and also, I don't take this the wrong way, but like
everybody here is hippie. Like, I was well reminded when I went to LA. I was like,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's like you go to like Chico State.
Yeah.
And it's also a CSU, but you go there and it's very, very different.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a lot more conservative. They have like we have one fraternity and one sorority, whereas there they have to shut down the school on St. Patrick's Day because of the sorority and fraternity.
yeah,
So it's like-
perfect. So for a lot of different reasons, there are different students choose to be here for those reasons. Yeah, so even if I did my study, I had some conclusions, probably a limitation of my study would be these only really apply to maybe, this particular school, maybe other schools that are similar, because there probably are some out there, but I really can't generalize to like all of college students.
Wouldn't it, even if you like branched out to all like California colleges, wouldn't it still generalize it too much to just California instead of like Ohio or something?
Yeah, I mean, so if we would want to generalize to all California, that could be our population. We might not want all the U.S., but we definitely want then representatives from community college, Cal State, and UC. Like we tried to get Southern California and Northern. We do our best to get that representative sample. And with random sampling, if we had a list of all college students, we could randomly pick from there. Yeah, good point. Okay, super. Oh yeah, on your worksheet, you're going to need to know these definitions. So these pertain to experiments. There are different kinds of variables in experiments. I mentioned experiments look at a cause and effect relationship. So an independent variable, or IV, looks at the cause, right? What is the cause of people's behavior? What's behind it, right? The cause has to happen first. We also call this the treatment variable, the experimental variable, right? The thing that we change as researchers. What are we manipulating? Okay. The dependent variable, or the DV, that is our outcome. That's the effect, right? Part of the cause and effect relationship. So it's what we're trying to predict or explain. Outcome variable is how I usually remember it the most. Okay. So is it academic performance? Is it depression symptoms, right? Is it workplace productivity? What are we ultimately interested in? So IVDV, how many people have heard that before? Maybe statistics or somewhere else? Okay. So you're going to be practicing identifying IVs and DVs. And then there are other variables. These are important because sometimes they mess with our understanding of the IV and DV. So things like confounding variables or third variables, they influence the relationship between the IV and DV in some way. Maybe we're not even interested in that variable, but they are having an influence. The word confound means confused in Latin. So a confounding variable is basically like we're confused about what the real cause is to this effect. And maybe it's an alternative explanation that we didn't consider in our study. Researchers can account for these variables ahead of time and put them into statistical models to control for them. So it's important that we recognize them. If you're familiar with spurious relationships or spurious correlations, that's referring to confounding variables. All right. You can go back to these ones that we don't go over. I just don't have enough time today. Okay. So in order to infer a causal relationship, which is the goal of experimental design, we have to have three things. One is there must be a statistically significant association between the cause and effect, right? They are related. That's great. Okay. What is that? What is that word again when two variables are related to one another? Say it a little loud. Two variables statistically associated. A correlation? Yes.
Without
Okay.
causation.
Correlation. Correlation is needed for causation, but correlation does not equal causation. So more is needed. It's great that they're related, but we also have to have number 2. So number 2 is temporal precedence. Temporal means time. So this is saying the cause has to come before the effect, right? In time, in order to conclude causation. And then 3 is we try to conclude that no other variables, right, influence the relationship. We try to account for alternative explanations through statistics, through how we design our research. It's really, really hard to do. We often miss some, but we try to do that. Okay.
Cool.
All right. How's everyone feeling? Okay? Okay. I'm going to see, I'm just going to preview a little of how far I want to get to today. Okay. We already went over quasi-experiments, so I'm just going to give you a little more information here. But what you need to know is sometimes we want to have a cause and effect conclusion, but it's not ethical or practical or feasible to conduct a true experiment, and that's when we use a quasi-experimental design. All right. I think we're going to end there. We did not finish all of the lecture slides for today, so we'll continue on Monday. I'll see you all on Monday. We don't have class Friday. You do have seminar, so I'll see you in seminar if I haven't